somewhat related anecdote here. So you mentioned parties before. I am not good at parties. I will stress if I'm thinking about how to make small talk with people at a barbecue or something like that. So I actually read books on this, like how to get me out of this, how to be social without being social, I guess. I don't know. So
Do
in
you
this,
want to know the secret?
what is it?
Ask them about themselves.
I was going to say this is the advice that I found in books, and it was extremely useful. Just ask a
Ask
question.
them about themselves.
What do you do for a living? Oh yeah? How do you like it?
Where
Oh,
you
yeah?
from? How you been? And
Yeah.
don't talk about yourself.
Then I end up not saying anything really, and they had a great time. They like me because I
They
like
love
them,
you.
or it looks
The
like I like
more,
them.
well, the more they talk, the more they like you. It's the most amazing thing.
Well, people's favorite subject is themselves, right? So just,
Absolutely.
but the point is, I see a big difference between the people where all I ask is, yeah, what do you do? And they just keep going on and on and on and on and on. And yet, person just says, yeah, I'm in IT at this company down the road, and then stops, allows for another question. And even if I'm just asking the questions because I don't know what to do with the conversation, it's still, we end up getting quite a lot of information back and forth. And it's usually
Yeah.
that person I end up liking a lot more than the one that just kept going on and on,
Funny how that works, isn't it?
even if it was an interesting subject.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I had a business, as I said, I had a business partner. And first year we were together, we went to all the holiday parties trying to sell business. And I got a call from a client in the morning, said, "Oh, your business partner is fantastic." And I look over and he's got his feet up on his desk, laying back, sleeping, not generating any money, having a good old nap. And I'm thinking, oh, okay. So I said to him, "How do you do it?" And he said, "Simple. I just ask people about themselves. I like people. I like learning about people. So the more I ask about themselves, the more they talk, and the more they talk, the more they like me, and the better we get along."
It's awesome, and they don't know anything about you, but sometimes they will. They'll be, they're flattered that you are asking about them, and then it's sort of common sense to ask a question about the other person now, and
Yeah,
now it's an easy conversation back and forth, ping pong.
exactly. Exactly. It's the simplest thing. It's so easy to work a room if you really know how.
One more anecdote before we get to the other steps. So when I was at the University of Sydney on Wednesdays, I believe, there was a room upstairs where everybody who was finishing their PhDs or just finished or masters or whatever it is, we have to put a presentation together. Of course, you have to put a presentation together for your sponsors, but they would practice on Wednesdays. So after school hours or whatever, we would all go upstairs, 6 o'clock, whatever, a conversation with about their work. And very clearly, in 2, 3, 5 minutes, they were able to convey exactly what they did without any of the details. Because as you're talking about separating writing and verbal, I don't need those details right now. I'm happy to read your paper, the one that you published to do this presentation. Let me see the paper. I'd love to see it. Let me
Mhm.
see the graph in a printout before the presentation. Well, you say that's a bad thing because you don't want them reading during the presentation, but maybe,
Yeah, if they've absorbed it, typically sponsors will read it in advance, yes. So
yeah,
there
I
is a
like to read
place
it
for
in
that.
advance and I
Yeah,
get more from the presentation, but
exactly.
I could read it after too. So
Yeah.
there are mine at UCID, Daniel Harrison, who is now Dr. Harrison. He got to do a TED Talk at some point here, and the TED Talk was phenomenal. Well, it turns out they give you a lot of guidance, right? And you're supposed to practice it and get it as clean as you can get it. And so it's no wonder to me now watching pretty much any TED Talk that it's much easier to see. It's much easier to experience than a normal presentation. And funnily enough, I love Dan here, but his regular presentations, he didn't keep that up so much. It's just like all the attention was put into this one presentation, and it was very, very good. And we didn't carry those habits into the other presentations.
Wouldn't it be better for your audiences if you tried to do exactly what he did and let your fellow professionals be professionals and not be spoon-fed information through the use of PowerPoint? Oh my God, you'd think I'd have attacked the holy grail of urology, for crying out loud.
But these
They
same
arguably,
doctors, they just viewed a great presentation without PowerPoints, but then they immediately started making their PowerPoint presentations about that content.
exactly. And when anybody here ever prescribed Viagra? Every hand, of course, in the place goes up. You do realize that a similar observation to the one I've just made, if it hadn't been made, Viagra wouldn't be the success that it is today. Because Viagra was originally a low blood for treating blood pressure. Did
I
you know
should have
that?
known that, but I didn't know that.
And so what they found was people were coming back saying, "Can I have some more of that?" And that's how they discovered Viagra's current use. But if someone ever would happen, well, that didn't tickle their fancies, and they all went back and delivered their presentations with PowerPoint.
So we've gone through put your audience first, and we've kind of touched on step two, structure the conversation. That's how
Yep.
you're actually creating the presentation itself. But you have your own framework here. So instead of just going on PowerPoint and creating your presentation that way, you do it more thoughtfully here in the step two. Do we need to explain any more of that? Should I point towards this presenter's toolbox that you sent me?
You can. I mean, the presenter's toolbox has all of the models. I guess the big thing about structuring the conversation is you should never use PowerPoint to develop your content. That's not why it was developed, and in that role, it's failed miserably. Use notes, but do not show your notes to the audience under any circumstances whatsoever.
Because
You
they're going
need
to read
notes to
them.
keep yourself on time and on track, but don't show those notes to your audience. They can be on your laptop in front of you. There's a whole bunch of ways I carry them with me on a piece of paper when I go up, but never show those notes to the audience. And for goodness sake, don't put them on a slide either to project or print.
Do you think there's any place for having simple slides? Like, you might be mad at me for this. So I read your book twice before I ever did my first real life PowerPoint presentation, and I had it in mind. Maybe I should have read it right before, but I did make a slideshow. It was about 8 slides. I've used it a few times, but there's almost no information on it. It's just a couple of words guides me to the next topic, but I could very easily have those notes in front of me. I don't think the audience is really gaining anything by having that up.
I doubt it that they are. I would agree with that. Yes.
So maybe in your best chance, it just does nothing.
If it could be wallpaper, sure, like a logo or the title slide, or I mean, you can use that. You can put it up. What a lot of people also don't know is you can walk over and hit the B key on your keyboard and it blanks the screen. So
That is good to know. Now, back to those academics, they do have some relevant graphs and stuff. Like, could you have the graph there and just quickly be like, hey, look, this went down, this went up, and then stop and let them look at it for a second and then move on?
yes, but I find it's better to pre preset their cognitive framework in advance before showing the visual. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a graph in a minute. It's going to show you um, this going down. It's going to show you this going up. The real part that you want to focus on is where those two lines intersect and what happens with those two lines at that intersection point, which is what we've been talking about so far.
And then take the visual away after they've looked at it
No,
for a
no,
second.
now you put the visual up
Okay.
and then you look at it yourself and absorb it and then watch them. And if they're all still looking at the visual, don't say a word. But once they start coming back, ask if there are any questions. If there aren't any questions, you might make one additional point on the visual, but as soon as you're done with it, bring it down and carry on the conversation.
I think you got to add to that. I like this idea that visuals are a spice, right? They can enhance your meal, but you can very quickly overdo it.
Yeah, well, there is no middle ground in this medium. If something doesn't add to the outcome you're seeking, it takes away from. So the more visuals you add, they're having an impact. And they're probably taking away from what it is you want to say. So if you don't need a visual, don't use a visual and carry on the conversation.
Fair enough. Speaking to a small group of people in a church in Detroit who are mostly elderly people, I'm just going to conduct the whole thing completely differently than a bunch of young yuppies in Denver, Colorado.
Again, if we go back to shared opinions, they may have similar opinions regardless of their age that predispose them to certain ways for you to communicate to influence them. So that's why analyzing audiences on the basis of shared opinions is incredibly important as well.
So how would you determine those shared opinions?
Well, go through the models that are in the presenter's toolbox. There's a whole series of questions to ask. And once you ask those questions, you'll pretty much have a good idea of what opinions your audience have. If you don't, then that's a place where you go out and do primary research.
And by the way, this presenter's toolbox and the 5 steps to conquer death by PowerPoint, all of these are on Amazon currently. And Eric, I just received your package this morning, so I have not read through the